Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
I'm Scott War. Welcome back to the Aging Athlete, our Trail Runner Nation mini-series, co-hosted by ultrarunning legend Krissy. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 50s, or even pushing into your 70s, this series is about embracing how our bodies and our minds evolve and how we can keep running strong through every stage of life. And let's be clear, and Don is always cautious about this. This series is not just about old people. It's about young people that are obviously getting old too. So the evolution of our age. It's for everyone who wants to run long, healthy, and happy throughout their life. Over the past previous six episodes of The Aging Athlete, we've talked about training smarter, not harder, covering everything from adapting training plans, optimizing hormones, and navigating menopause, to shifting recovery strategies, to dialing in the fuel that supports performance and longevity. Now, in this seventh episode, we're joined by Coach Ian Sharman. He's an elite ultra runner, a high respected coach, and soon to be author. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. Ian has more than 20 years of racing experience with an incredible streak of marathon and ultra wins that now span 2 decades. Yes, 20 years, 62 wins, 29 course records. And he just happens to also be a coach. He's been doing that now for about 15 years at Sharman Ultra. Today, we're going to dig into his perspective on sustaining your love for running, keeping adventure alive as the years stack up, and making the sport a lifelong pursuit that brings joy, meaning, and balance to your life. Ian, thanks for coming on and helping us with the Aging Athlete series.
Always good to be back, and I'm aging now, given I've just turned 45. So the questions and the things in this entire series are what I talk to people about the whole time, and also for myself that I've been considering now for a few years.
The whole clarifying on the aging athlete, it's not a certain age that we reach and therefore we are now aging. The reason this whole thing came to be was as an athlete as an ultra runner and athlete, as my 20s, 30s, 40s, looking down the barrel of 50s, and that progression over the decades, that's where, and so for someone in their 20s listening, they can get wisdom of what can I do now that holds me through all these decades going forward. So yeah, we're kind of balancing this aging word as I think it's a great thing. And there's kind of pushback on it sometimes too.
I totally agree then. And that's the point. That when I first started, I didn't want to be in this and oh, well, how do I peak and then blow up and I can't run past that point? And I think some people are willing to do that trade-off. That certainly seemed to be the way runners would be in kind of like the 80s. If you do as much mileage as possible, you hammer it. And by the time you're 30, you're done because your body just can't keep doing it. But I'm not a high mileage person. So it's something where it's been a gradual transition of changes, but you think ahead. Yes. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about there, Krissy. You don't just keep doing the same thing and then it doesn't work and you go, oh, my body works differently. You try and adjust for it.
And it's for dogs too. It's not the aged athlete, it's the aging athlete. So kind of look at that word a little specific. Don, did you have something?
No, I had something to say a while back when Ian had said that he's 45 now, but he's just put down some serious time on a marathon. I remember reading that. Tell us about that, Ian, if you could, or maybe I'm way off.
Not a serious time. But in the last couple of years, I've been doing some downhill ones. So it was, again, thinking ahead to the fact that I was aging. I knew there's only so much time that I could keep getting quicker. I'm pretty much at the limit of that now. So from this point, I will gradually slow down. But I want to take advantage of this. That's why I did more road running, marathons and things like that. And last year I did a 103 half marathon downhill, which is way quicker than I've ever gone before. But just a week ago, just right after I turned 45, I got a road marathon that was 2:42. So
nice.
Not too far off what I'd expect to be doing, but that's not focused on that completely. But the point being, you can still do fast stuff. You can still push yourself, but it's just broadening your definition of what success is and what to aim for. And that's a big part of what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm going to make one last comment before we dive in to the book and some of these topics. is I think about the scale of balance. And one side you have youth, on the other side you have wisdom and experience. And at some point there's a peak where those two intersect. You have to have enough youth and strength and power, and it needs to intersect at the right time with enough experience and wisdom. And that wisdom goes a long ways. It can pull you through a lot of races, not making mistakes that maybe a younger runner that doesn't have the experience. I think there's a lot to be said. I would like to pack my pack full of wisdom and maybe throw out a little youth, and I would think that would be a good bet to get finished.
I'm going to challenge you there, Freeman.
All right.
I think that there's some fun, adventurous experiences that come from naivete, not knowing what's going to happen and just exploring what's out there. But that's part of this aging athlete, right, Ian?
Well, exactly. But also it's that can keep going when you are experienced. I've been doing this for 20 plus years now. I can still find new stuff. One of the coolest things about running is that it's not like a lot of other sports where you're stuck to just one thing. Like you play on a court this size and it's all kind of the same no matter where you do it. For us, you can be in a desert, you can be in a jungle, you can be at the top of mountains, you can be doing road stuff, you can go around a track, you can do a 5K, you can do 200 miles. Those are basically different sports, but they're also the same sport. And so whatever you may have done for a long time, there's always something new. And that's a big part of the kind of identity of not just being, I'm an ultra runner, or I'm a fast runner, or I'm a age group runner, or whatever it may be. Instead, it's, I am an athlete, and just trying to think of it a little bit more broadly, including when you're 20, not just when you get a bit older and maybe you can't get PRs anymore, but the whole time trying to think ahead of what is it I like about the sport. And that includes hanging out with people, the social side of things, the things you're learning from other people, the people you meet, the friends you make, the places you go to. All of that goes on forever. It's not just about how much your body can still do. But the other thing, of course, being an ultra runner is that it doesn't decline that quickly. Not like a power sport where by about 30, 35, you're pretty much on a steep decline.
Ian, when you mentioned your age 45 and your time in this last marathon, and you said that you've probably reached the point where you're going to get slower, you said that almost with a little bit of joy in your voice. Tell us a little bit how have you always looked forward to how you've been aging and now tipping over to where you're going to be slow? How do you come to grips with that?
I wouldn't say I like the idea of slowing down. I would rather stay as fast as I ever could be and keep getting faster. I think it's more just the accepting the fun things I can get out of the sport. So, for example, when I was with lots of sponsors and they had pressures to do a big race or get a particular style of race or a finish that's at the front of that race, that takes some of the fun away. So the thing I'm kind of looking forward to more is just even having more freedom to explore, that I can just do whatever I want. And it's not like I didn't before, but as you age, you maybe get more opportunities. And it could be in that case that sponsors want you to do certain things and not other things. It could be that the kids leave home and then you've got time to travel and go to that exotic race you always wanted to go to, or you've got more time to train when you're retired, or any number of things. But it's the fact that it changes through time and you can predict bits of that and you can plan for it. And rather thinking of everything as a negative, like I'm older, I'm slower, you can instead roll with the punches and look at the more positive side of, well, now I can do some of the stuff I always wanted to do, or now I've got the budget to be able to do those things. And it's really the same mentality you want to have at all times, including just in a race. How do you spin the way you look at it to get the positive side out of it rather than focusing on the negative? Because getting slower, kind of seems negative, but it's not the only aspect of the sport that matters.
So as I'm listening to this conversation, I'm recognizing some of the topics that you have written in your book, because we don't know the name of the book yet. The title we don't know. You're withholding that, which is good. We know the author is going to be Ian Sharman, so we know that. and you've outlined the book. You start off calling it, this first section, training, the next section racing, and the third section, beyond racing. And that's what we're going to talk about today, beyond racing. Some of these topics that we were just speaking to what are the beyond the racing piece? And so I'd like to dig in, if we can, to that third section, beyond racing. So tell us a little about beyond racing. What inspired you to create another race book, another running book, and have that section beyond racing? Because I'm fascinated to learn.
Well, I'd say that the main thing for the entire book is just there's certain things that over the last 15 years of coaching, I've refined how I say things, and I've learned different ways to explain the same concepts. And I also see that being repeated by other coaches and other sports. And there's kind of some universal truths there. And I've just found that there's certain things that some of them are even quite basic, not easy to do, but simple ideas that people miss out on. And if you don't get these core things right, then you're not going to get as much out of the running, both in terms of physical fitness, ability to finish stuff, to execute as well as you can. And so, the beyond racing is really just acknowledging the fact that that's not all running's about. It's part of it. It's really fun to do races. It motivates us to take on the big challenge. It gives us the excitement of having other people around. But also, it's not that you have to keep getting faster. Otherwise, why bother doing it? And then to some people, they stop once they get slower, or they stop when they get older and injuries make it harder to train. So the beyond racing, I talk to people like Mike Wardian, for example, who's a few years older than me. He's in his 50s now. He does every kind of run and race under the sun. He does adventure racing, and he's actually now training for I think it's a cross-Atlantic rowing challenge that he'll be doing in the next year or two. So to him, being an athlete is in one way running, but it's every type of running. It's every type of sport that he can get himself into that has some kind of endurance focus. And to me, that's something that lasts way longer, and it stays exciting because you're not just saying, well, I got my marathon PR. Now I'm going to get it another 2 seconds off. Instead, you're saying, well, I got a marathon PR, but now I'm going to row across the Atlantic. Totally different challenge, new things you got to do, new muscles you're going to use, all these exciting elements that are in there that are beyond just doing a race, and particularly the same type of race again and again.
Ian, one of the things that you talk about is identity. I want to know from you, at what point in your running career did you finally identify as a runner? And then the second question is, when you coach people, how do you talk about identity and how do they perceive identity as an endurance runner?
Well, I actually probably came to it more thinking of myself as an athlete in the first place, because I didn't like running growing up. I played team sports. I liked running around, chasing a ball. So I was doing multiple different things. And if you do more than one sport, you naturally kind of think of yourself as an athlete versus just, I'm a footballer, I'm a hockey player, I'm a runner. And so it was already starting from that. And then when I started running, that became the main thing. That started dominating everything. But I'd also hear some people who'd say, I'm an ultra runner, I'm a marathon runner, I'm a mutt runner, mountain ultra trail. And I thought, why not just be at least a runner? Because then you're opening the door to so many more experiences. But even beyond that, just be an athlete. Because when you're injured, you can't help the fact that maybe you can't run. If you're ill, injured, if you're not as fast as you used to be and you've got to run less, sometimes as people get a bit older, they maybe have to switch to doing some cycling as well as running. But if you're thinking of yourself as an athlete, you're not as worried about the fact that you're adapting and adjusting. You're just saying, well, this is what an athlete does. And it allows me to do even more things that I enjoy doing. Another person I spoke to for this section of the book was Anton Kripicka. And so, very famous guy. He was known as the runner. And up until about, 12, 13 years ago, he was 100% all about running, super high mileage, and very much his identity was focused on being a runner. But then because of injuries, he gradually just decided to become more of a mountain guy. And so he broadened the idea of what he was. So he was doing climbing, he was doing mountain biking, and that still allowed him to enjoy the mountains. And he realized that, and actually one of the things that I didn't think he'd say was he enjoyed hiking, because he always thought that hiking was like almost the loser option versus running. But he realized that he could enjoy the mountains more by having a wider expanse of things that he could do there. And I thought that was such a good way of just, even someone at the top level who, a lot of people think of him as a runner and nothing else, could just broaden how he defined himself. And then he can enjoy things more. He doesn't feel like I'm a runner in the past or I can't run as much. Instead, he's an athlete who enjoys mountains. That just seems so much more long-lasting and endurable and enjoyable as well.
Just quick question to interrupt before you answer the second part of Scott's question. what did you get into the psyche of that with Anton, of like, how was that transition? Like, I understand that you went through it, but how, like, was it hard? Was it depressive at times? Did he go into it and it just all felt great? Like, how did he get in? Did you get into the psyche of that with him?
Yeah, I mean, he said it was hard.
Yeah.
As you'd expect. If you are one of the world's best runners and then you can't run as much, or you don't get to race at all for a season, you're naturally going to think yourself as kind of lesser. And I think it took him a while to fully transition. And at first it was cycling's a thing he could do just to fill in the gaps, just to keep some fitness
until
up.
he could run again, probably.
Until he could run again.
Yeah.
And after a while, his mindset changed to, no, I do cycling because I like cycling.
Right.
I do mountain climbing because I like mountain climbing. And I think part of it is just taking the pressure off yourself. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter whether you're front of the pack or back of the pack. You can think of yourself as a broader athlete. And that is an identity that can stay with you forever. And also when you're injured and maybe you can't run, you stop thinking, oh, well, I'm not me. Instead, you can say, I am still an athlete, and an athlete looks after themselves when they're injured to get back to doing things they love.
And then that finer point, it sounds to me like the advice is getting to, like, so that you don't have to go through that hard transition, is starting from a more broad place is where you're coming to. Like, this is an example. Thank you, Anton, for the example of what it takes to go through it. I often said, like, the tips in my book of going through massive chafing in my first 50K. Hopefully you don't have to, so these kind of examples of where you can start from to hopefully your experience can go broader from beyond and maybe avoid some of these harder points. Although there's a lot to learn from going through the hard stuff. Like, that's another topic.
Well, everyone's going to have their own journey there. And so I just happened to start off as more of other sports. And so it wasn't very difficult for me to think of myself as more broad-based. But imagine you're someone who is a good cross-country kid at high school, and then you're on a scholarship at university, and then you become a professional runner. You're going to be a bit more biased towards running. But even there, it's worth thinking of yourself as something a bit more than that, partly because it pigeonholes you more than you need to. You know, there's so many more fun things you can enjoy, and that fitness is super useful for everything else you're going to do as well. So one of the things I mentioned in one of those later chapters is the idea that you don't have to just do races. You can do things like go across the Grand Canyon. So a normal person who wants to go to the Grand Canyon and go from rim to rim to rim, that's about 42 miles. What they have to do is book it a year in advance to get campsites. Then they've got to have a 25-pound backpack with tents and stuff. If you're an ultra runner, you can say, I can do that in a day, and ideally with friends and safely, etc. But you can get across all of that and just plan to just have a small backpack and carry a little bit of liquid and food, and then top that up along the way. But by thinking of yourself as a racer, for example, I'm the fast guy doing races, you're limiting yourself away from stuff like that, which is still running. Or if you only do 100-milers and you say, I'm not a fast person, try a 5K. I was actually amazed during the pandemic how many people, because they couldn't race, and I said to them, well, let's give you a target still. And we did some 1 mile and 5K time trials on a track because they could do that without anyone else around. And they loved it. So the first time they were hesitant, going, this isn't me. This isn't who I am. I'm a distance runner. And then they did it. And I know I can do that better. That was fun. That was exciting. That was new. And they broadened their scope of how they looked at themselves as a runner.
You know, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking all the other sports, whether it's boxing, basketball, whatever it is, you know, they have running involved. They do that as part of their training to get their fitness level up. And here we are running on a regular basis, getting ourselves fit, building an engine that can be used for just about anything. And we can get out there and explore and do things. We've been training for that next thing, and maybe starting to look at it that way as you know what, I've got a lot of fitness. What can I do with this fitness? And start reaching out and doing some challenging things. And there's going to be some some learning that's going to, you know, cross-pollinate is probably the wrong word, but you're going to learn some things at that new event or that new sport that's going to come back to running, and you're going to learn some things and say, wow, this makes me a better runner when I go out and learn that lesson doing that next project.
And part of that might be physical things that make you fitter and better able to do the running. Part of it might be tactics or a different way of looking at things, just because you're broadening the experiences you're getting. And as a runner, that goes on forever. So if you start off with the idea that you want to do loads of different things within the sport, rather than just, I want to be a 200-mile racer and that's all I'm going to do, then you just get a lot more fun out of it. And if one thing's not working, there's another thing you can do.
I love this as we're talking about the aging athlete, not the aged athlete, that the identity when you're in your 20s, let's say you're in your 20s and you're in college and you decide, you know, I read the book Born to Run and I want to be an ultra marathoner. That's the identity I want. Well, maybe that's not realistic. Maybe we need to start out with, I want to be an outdoor athlete. I want to, go and be a runner or a mountain runner. And then you slowly or evolve into running longer distances. I would bet you get athletes all the time, Ian, that come to you and say, I used to run in high school. I used to run in college. I haven't done a whole lot, but I want to run 100 miles. Can you train me?
Well, that's a very common thing. And particularly when they're fast, they want to go from being a good collegiate athlete to being one of the best in the world ultra runner within about 3 months. And so I have to just go, okay, there's a bit of a learning
the expectations
curve
are not quite right.
Yeah. But no, it's good that they're looking at different things. But yeah, definitely part of it is also putting time frames on things. So if you take up cycling, maybe you don't enter a 100-mile bike race a week after you started doing it, but maybe you have that for next season as part of your overall season of just different things you can do. And it overlaps and enhances what you're doing, both in terms, hopefully, of fitness, but also just giving you more options. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things I try and do with people. Like one of the simplest things is I encourage anyone who's just doing trail running to have at least a little bit of road or track so they can get some more speed. If they're doing just road running, get at least a little bit of trail so they get a little bit more ankle strength and leg strength and they're used to the hills. Because some road marathons still have small hills. Boston's a great example. So for someone who just trains for the dead flat stuff, they're not going to have the adaptability to deal with the hills of Boston or the weather of Boston. And equally, someone who is a mountain runner and they're just used to kind of hiking the whole day to do a 100-miler, maybe it'll help them to do a bit more running, get a sense of these faster paces, and it'll make them a better runner at the thing they care about the most. So it is about improving the key thing, but it's also about giving you other things that you can do really well and that can keep you interested for the long term.
So we've got two elite athletes on the call here, and a couple of great coaches. If someone comes to you like that hypothetical person that Scott brought up, I used to run in college. Pretty easy for me to do a 5-minute mile. I should be able to do a 100-mile. And they start doing the math. I can get a silver buckle, no problem. But it's much different. What do you subscribe to your clients? How much running should they do? And how much cross training? Now, with your experience of your own body, but watching all these other runners, do you lay something out that says, hey, you know what? Let's do some swimming. Let's do some cycling. Let's do some weightlifting. Do you plug that into their programs? I'll start with Krissy first.
I do. Yes is the answer, the simple, quick answer. And I think a lot of that, that person that's coming to you, that's a conversation more not just about the training plan, but the expectations and what they're going to learn from their training. So there's these opportunities to be out in the mountains. And I guess I would make the argument, does somebody need to do a 50-miler before they do a 100-miler? And there's arguments for both physicality, but I would make the argument for the mental component. If they can be there mentally, they might not need that physical stimulation. If they've got the background that they do, but the piece that I like to work through with people is how do you get the mental, not just adaptation, but just understanding of what you do. How do you pivot in moments of challenge? A lot of that comes in the time you spend on the trails, training, figuring out your gear, where do you store stuff in your packs? And to think not just because running a 5-minute mile is extraordinary, but in this case, just because you can run a 5-minute mile doesn't mean that extrapolates out evenly to being able to complete 100 miles. So what do you do differently as those miles progress that you learn about your body and how it changes? And that's not just in your gear. Like, how do you muscularly respond? When do you take electrolytes? Somebody that's running a 5-minute mile probably is not trying to pound down 200 to 400 calories an hour and moving their nutrition around. So some skills that would come that I think would happen in conversation first and then reflect in a training plan that includes different activities that are going to support their long-term health of being able to run for not just this said bucket list 100-miler, maybe hopefully for their entire life, as long as everything keeps aligning. Ian, you gotta push back on that or follow through?
No, I agree with that. I mean, I certainly incorporate things beyond just running the type of thing they'll do in a race. So if they're a trail runner, they have road running, they have hiking, some degree of strength training. I don't necessarily make them do things like cycling or swimming, especially because a lot of people are really time pressed. You know, they have a job, they have kids. It's difficult to fit everything in. So I want to maximize the time they can get in running. But this idea of being an athlete at all times, instead of, say, getting in the car to go and check the mail, walk to get the mail. Instead of at the airport, every single time, I will take the stairs rather than the escalator. If I can take the stairs instead of the elevator, I will, unless it's like a skyscraper or something. So it's just looking for ways to move whenever you can. Trying to do that multiple times through the day. One thing I have is in my garage, I've got a pull-up bar. So I can just pop in there in between calls, in between bits of work, and I'm moving around then, and I'm just stretching a little bit, including my back, getting a little bit of strength work, but it's just fitting these things in through the day. So rather than saying to them, you must all bike, and that if you don't bike, you won't be the best runner you can be, I try to fit in all the things they can during the day, as well as the running training, just to make them look for opportunities, basically. And when I first got into running, and I was using running mainly to train for soccer, I would run around the pitch, and you could see where other people had run around it. You could see that it was a little bit muddy and had been worn away. And it was just cutting off all the corners. And I remember thinking at that point, I'm going right into the corner. It's, 0.1% longer, but it's the mentality of how do I get a little bit more exercise here? And it's mentally choosing the tougher option as well. So that's a totally separate topic. But by always looking for movement and trying to do things that are a bit harder, you're better prepared physically and mentally to then cope with things in a race or really in anything.
Yeah, talk about life. That's a great adaptation for downstream. If you'll do it, if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing.
Did you guys hear my Eureka?
I wondered what that
was. That's our golden nugget alarm.
Oh, we finally got one.
We finally got one, and we use it sparingly, but I'll do it again in case listeners don't know what it is. Hang on. Eureka! My point there, Ian, for me, and I'm the judge. I guess either Krissy or Don, you can text me and say, hey, golden nugget, but I get to be the chooser of that. I like the idea of being identified as an athlete and having that guide your day. What are you going to eat? Are you going to eat the bacon double cheeseburger for lunch? No, I'm an athlete. I'm going to have the salad.
But as an athlete, you can still have those things.
Cheeseburger,
you don't have to be perfect.
I'm trying to make a point here, guys. I'm trying to make a point here that you make better decisions when you're thinking of your identity as an athlete. So that was my eureka moment. Sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
I thought for a minute it was Krissy's dog getting a dog toy.
She's being good girl now. Well, she's always a good girl. She's alerting me when she's barking. Yeah.
You gave us a bit of a summary, Ian, before we started the podcast, on your upcoming book, because we don't have it yet, because it's not out yet.
Can we ask him when it's coming out? Is this coming out next month? Is it coming out in 10 years?
Yeah, let's ask him.
So I have written it. It is with the publisher and the editing, and this is September 2025. So it will be out within a year. I'm hoping it'll be out within a few months, to be honest, but it will be within a year.
Okay.
Excellent.
Good.
Exciting.
Have you chosen the picture for the cover yet? Do you want us to submit some things for you, Ian, perhaps?
Why don't you two provide the most amazing photos you can, and I'll pick something.
Yeah, I don't think it'll make it, Scott.
That's kind of the fun here, and I'm sure Krissy had this with her book. There's all these bits of kind of artistic ways to express yourself in this. So there's the advice, but then what photos do you use, and how do you package it all? So that's kind of fun as well. And this also fits in kind of with that idea of, I am a runner. I'm also a coach. I'm also an athlete. Now I'm an author. It's just, you're broadening your identity. It doesn't have to be just athletic identity we're talking about here. We're talking about everything. Why not just make yourself more than just this one thing you might pigeonhole yourself into?
One of my favorite parts was picking, like, I wanted it to be a floppy manual feeling book. Like, I wanted people open it and writing it and dog ear and put post-it notes and having that training manual piece. So that expression of what I wanted the book to be. I wanted to ask this, and I thought we'd kind of talk through the book a bit, but I'll throw it in now. I have my guesses of why you would want to write this book, but I thought it'd be cool to hear directly from you. It's such a awesome process in full sense of like what it requires to sit down, write a book. For me, it took a lot of solo mental headspace. And as an extrovert person that loves to be out in the mountains, it was like counterculture to how I'd spent the better part of 2 decades. So yeah, what motivated that? I guess the question is, what motivated writing a book, knowing that there's all these other pieces that come to the table when it means actually sitting down to write it?
I always wanted to be able to kind of put this knowledge down on paper. And it, like I said earlier, it's kind of certain things that I noticed, particularly kind of key things that just get missed by a lot of people. So sometimes people are getting the basics wrong. And then it doesn't matter if you're doing this extra little thing that's for the 0.1% extra improvement, if you get this major thing that's worth 20% improvement wrong. So it's partly just to kind of lay out that. So this isn't the guide to everything in running ever. This is more my key takeaways from a couple of decades worth of coaching of what are the main things people miss out on, and also the ways that you can actually explain things to people that they can use in practice. It's one thing to say to someone, you've got to pace better. It's another thing to say, well, you can do that by splitting the race into thirds. The first third, you're thinking about holding yourself back and just getting deeper into the race, and just thoughts that they can have at certain points that will dictate how they adjust what they're doing. And so there's just multiple ways that I've kind of learned to explain stuff over the years. And I thought it was good to put it in one place. I was also thinking that as a kind of personal learning element, by having to explain stuff in detail, more than just here's a couple of sentences explaining an idea, instead it's a chapter explaining it, I had to get my thoughts clearer, and so make myself better at being able to get a point across to people. And so I thought that it would make me a better coach as well.
That's really cool.
Well, then I'm going to ask this question to both authors here. Do you think that what did you learn from writing this book? Krissy, when you wrote your book on the manual and how to run your first ultra, what was your big takeaway from that? Did you come away with a eureka moment that said, I'd never really thought about this until I put pen to paper?
It actually came in the negotiation back and forth with the publisher. The aha that surprised me was how drawn in I was to the first time experience. There's a little bit more to the story, but once I had to push back to be the one to write running your first ultra. I didn't want to write another training book on, say, an aspect of fastpacking. I really fell in love with the idea of, and that's the client base I really love to work with, is that person that doesn't know that they can do it, but they're curious enough to want to try. And that has carried through. I mean, the first edition came out in 2015, so at least 10 years. I still am drawn to that mentality. And I think there's maybe there's a eureka, like a golden nugget to that, like the curiosity piece. Ian, you said that even in your one of your explanations of when you're curious about what else you can do, that can be a motivator and the long-term aspect of keeping longevity going. And so even as somebody that's done this for 3 decades, going on more now, I can still find that through other people's initial step into something that I've loved for so long. There's still new nuggets that are learned by those newbies. So I don't know if that really came from the writing process or it was in that initial conversation and then the follow-up after with, I put in the book, hey, reach out, let me know how your first ultra goes. And those emails always come in on the best days, like having a rough day or whatever. And somebody will send their photo of the finish line and how the book and the training plans got them prepared and what nugget they heard in their brain from my voice, whatever, always come in on the best days. And so that, I think it just gets reinforced over and over. And I hope you have that kind of connection with people reading your book, because 10 years later, it's still like a highlight to having put that much time into writing that piece.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. I want to be able to help. I mean, that's what, as a coach, it's one of the most fun things when you help someone do a race that they didn't think was possible, or maybe over a number of years they build up something, and at the beginning they wouldn't even have dreamed of trying that, and then they actually succeed. And so the final chapter of the whole book is called Avoid Burnout.
Yes.
And this is because I get runners who either it's the whole topic really of aging as an athlete is they get bored when they can't get faster, or they realize their motivations from 10 years ago no longer motivate them. And that could be speed-based or something else. And so I want to be able to talk about how you can do this for the longer term as well. And so that is a big chunk of the end of the book, is more about how are you going to get the most out of running when you're at your peak, and how can you keep doing it for longer, and maybe you can improve in different ways. Maybe it's not just you can do a marathon quicker. Now it's that you can do a 200-miler quicker because you've gained these decades of experience. But there's so many people, I think, who maybe miss out on a big chunk of what they could get out of running because they keep too narrow a focus, or when they can't get quicker, they fall away from it. And so I wanted to give plenty of reasons and ways of doing it to avoid that happening.
Well, this question is to both of you as well. Krissy kind of brought it up, and Ian, you kind of danced around it. And that is, and I'm curious to know if the people that we hang around at the race finish line or the start line or even during the race, you say we all need adventure, and that adventure is going somewhere in the unknown, right? To Krissy, to your point, you like to deal with athletes that are thinking, hey, this sounds interesting, but I don't know whether it's possible. That's an adventure. And Ian, to your point, as you're in your 20s and you're going, can I run a 13.1 half marathon, or can I go out on the trails? I don't even know where I'm going. Are there bugs? Are there snakes? That can be an adventure. Why did you include a chapter on that we need adventure? Is that for everyone or just 100%. Our tribe?
Yeah, no, that's everyone. It doesn't matter what you're doing, because adventure, it really means doing something a bit risky, or doing something where there's the unknown. And so you could be a 5K runner who does a 10K. That's the unknown. It could be that you travel somewhere and you go into deepest, darkest jungles that you've never been in. It's totally different to your home. But adventure really is just trying new things, the novelty of keeping things fresh. That could be being a runner, doing some cycling. It could be learning to power hike better, and then you're able to move to some hillier races and take advantage of being in mountains. But adventure is also, different languages, different people, travel, all of that is part of it. But it really, at its simplest, is just humans need to be pushed to do slightly different things. So I think you guys probably have read Alex Hutchinson's latest book, which is basically the topic of why we need adventure. So remind me I've got it right behind me somewhere here.
The Explorer's Gene.
That's the one. That's the one. I just finished reading it, but
it's a great book.
You're not looking at the front page. But in that, he points out that there's literally a gene that we have that makes us want to explore. It makes us want to try out the new thing versus the thing we already know. And that is such a big part of what we're doing as trail runners, or ultra runners, or runners, or athletes at all. And so that is inbuilt. That is part of who we all are.
And just a plug, I will try to remember to include in the show notes. We did an episode with Alex on his book, The Adventure Gene.
Cool.
And I was able to mention it in my book because I've only just finished writing it. I've only just finished reading his book. It's like, I'll put something in about that because that's quite useful.
We'll make sure he knows that, so he can do that with your book too, and it'll be kind of a thing you guys can trade on that. And when you were talking about adventure, I started thinking, I'm going to use 100 miles just because 100 is like 100%. How many different decisions do you have to make during that 100 miles? An adventure could be making a different choice, maybe going out a little bit faster than you thought. Because if you push the boundary, you might hit a PR. There's a lot of decisions that we make through a race that make it an adventure. Ian?
Yeah, and actually, it was more the fact that I could do adventures that got me into running than that I ran and then did adventures. So I was not a runner. but I played these other sports. I saw a TV show about the Marathon des Sables, and it's like, ooh, it's the Sahara Desert, how exotic, and they're out there for a week, and it looks epic. And I entered that, and then I became a runner. And I had 18 months to build up to it. So I didn't become a runner and then enter some races. I saw an adventure that I wanted to do, and it happened to be a running adventure. If that show had been a mountain biking adventure, I might be a mountain biker as my predominant thing. I don't know, but the whole point is this is literally what got me into the sport.
Oh, that's cool.
Hey, Krissy, I want to ask you what got you into this. As I recall, was Hard Rock? No, UTM. Which was your first race? What got you into this adventure endurance space? I forgot.
I would say I was actually the exact opposite of Ian. I would always have called myself a runner. Ran in grade school, high school, college, did the all 3 seasons at the University of Washington, studied in Ecuador. It was coming back from Ecuador and working in a running shoe store with the likes of Scott McCubry and Scott Jurek. So I was heavily influenced by the people that I was around at 21. And the Chuckanut 50K plug, once again, I always squeeze one in, I feel like, was my first ultra back in 2000. And this year will be 24 years. So half my life race directing said event of my first foray into ultras. That's my long, short story of how I got into it.
Link will be in the show notes.
There we go.
Checking that 50.
But also, you see how that's opposite ends of the scale.
Yep.
And we ended up somewhere fairly similar, liking doing trails and mountains and ultras.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave it more open-ended, and so I started off with it being totally open-ended, then you just have more opportunities to find something novel and adventurous, rather than you stick to one thing and you don't even consider the other things.
Something I related to what you said, though, even having come from a running background, I think, Scott, you asked the question, when did you identify as a runner? I pushed back on that forever. I wanted to be more than a runner always. Like, I didn't want to just be, you've probably been in circles where, oh, you're the runner. Well, there's lots of runners. I'm not the only runner. And I pushed back on that, even when I quit office job, full runner, to even own that identity at that point. And I even marveled, I think it was a Hayden Hawks interview, I don't know what year it was, even when he, on his YouTube thing, it said professional ultra runner under his name. And I was like, he's identifying as, I pushed back on that for so long. So that's been I think that's, for me, that's been an evolution in the sport, because all these people I stood at these early starting lines with were all walks of life, parents, lawyers, doctors, garbage people, whoever, and they ran. And so this difference in the sport of, I make a profession of this. I think that's a cool shift in our sport. Kind of off topic, but I got there.
Well, and we've said this on the podcast many times. Whether you identify as a runner or an athlete, a mountain athlete, whatever that identifier is, that helps change action. To your point, Ian, you eat healthier, you run to the corner of the pitch instead of cutting the corner, and you make good decisions because of what you're identifying as. And because you're doing those things, that reinforces your identity. And so it's a circular building of identifying as something, and then that helps support what you do or motivate what you do, and what you do helps support that identity. And I think that's one of the biggest ahas I've had as I've gotten into running.
And when I do a race, I don't think of myself, because I did a race, I'm a runner. So like with Krissy, it's definitely a broader definition there. But when that happens, I'm also thinking, because I did this and because I put the work in for it, it keeps me healthier. It keeps me more athletic. And so they're the key kind of overarching elements of it. And running is just, the method I use to get there. But it doesn't have to be the method. There's other ways too.
Or you identify as somebody that can do hard things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So when something hard comes along, you can go, I got this. I do hard things.
I had a follow-up too. We didn't spend too much time, so maybe I'll backtrack just a little bit on burnout. and there something you'd said, but we're far enough away from it now that I can't remember exactly what you said, Ian, but it triggered a thought of mine that I think we've talked about. I think it was on the Celine Yeager episode of comparison being a part of burnout. And something that I kind of stood out for my own experience is I never had the marathon phase of being a runner where you're comparing like mile splits or courses where the measurement is so like standard, or it's standardized on a marathon.
It's so comparable. That's the point. Yeah.
And so at 20, I went straight, like I did a half marathon, but then I ran in 50Ks and hit the trails. And that was 2+ decades. And I just wonder if that comparison to earlier self, like you can't really, even comparing Western states to Western states, like it was a hot year or a cool year. Like there's so many factors that the comparison isn't as exact as it can be in, say, marathon running. So I guess if you had thoughts on how comparison can be a part of burnout and how to avoid getting in that downward spiral of inevitably leading to burnout.
I completely agree. I mean, part of it is you compare to the times you did in the past. You compare to the training you could do in the past. Like, oh, I was used to do 50 miles a week. Now I can only do 40. And if you think of your current thing as lesser, it's demotivating. If instead you can have other ways where it seems like it's more, then you're going to be more into it. So it could be that you have to do lower mileage or you need more recovery as you get a little bit older, particularly as you go into your 50s, 60s, 70s. But maybe then you're also doing cycling. And so you're doing less of one thing, more of another, but it all kind of bounces out to allow you to do fun things. So I think, as you say, it is very easy to compare and say, well, last year or 10 years ago, I could do this time in a race. Now it is 5% slower. What's the point? It's only going to get slower from there. But if instead you're looking for adventure, you're looking for new ways to test yourself. And importantly, that you're thinking of it as growing, not just being static. So this whole idea of having a growth mentality where instead of saying, I am fast, or I'm good at this, or I'm bad at this, you say, whatever you're doing, there's scope to improve it. And that may not be that your top speed improves, but maybe your speed in a long race improves, or maybe your speed on mountain terrain improves, or maybe just your ability to finish something you couldn't finish before improves. But there's different ways that you can kind of use that comparison to work out what you want to learn and grow. And it doesn't just have to be a number or a pace. And that, I think, in particular, was a big part of burnout, is if you get too focused on the outcome of, well, I used to be able to win, now I can't. I used to be able to get PRs, now I can't. That's just a negative thought. Instead, you're looking at, well, what can you do? So what are the things that are open to you? And then embrace that stuff.
Right.
I like that comment, Ian. So I'm thinking maybe the watch or the clock isn't a good tool to measure ourselves with, but maybe
not the only one. It still is. There's no harm in that, but it can't be the only one.
And maybe it's execution. How well did I execute my plan? I mean, that's the real key. Whether it took me, 20 hours or 40 hours, did I make the right decisions at the right time that allowed me to finish as I wanted to? And I think that would be a great way to measure ourselves instead of looking at the clock or the calendar, but starting to look at, how we executed.
And that goes beyond running, of course.
Yeah.
Because, you might measure yourself by your wage or your wealth or some status in your society, but to go a little bit beyond that, think of yourself a little bit more holistically.
I have a question that somewhat relates to that. And it's going to start off with a very pointed question to both Krissy and to Ian. When was your favorite year of running? Was there a year that you can go back and say, in 2021, that was the year? Do you have in your aging athlete life thus far, is there a point where you said that was the pinnacle, that was the most enjoyable, that was the year? You
go first, Krissy.
Oh, I got it.
Unless you need a second.
Well, I'll fill some of that time, Scott, since you didn't include me, which I'm thankful that you didn't. I'm curious to find out whether that peak, that pinnacle, was their fastest period or a period beyond that they have different perspective and can enjoy it more.
You're setting them up here, Freeman. I was
They
hoping
needed
that
some
they
help.
would come up with it anyway.
I could see their face. They didn't have much. I was just.
I have an answer. I have an
good.
answer for you. I would say 2009, 2010. And it's because I could see so much ahead of me. So that's the point where I moved to the US. It's the final year of having a normal office job. So I had a lot of change, and a lot of it was heading towards being able to do the stuff I wanted to do. Rather than having to go to an office, I could enjoy running. I could enjoy traveling to races. It wasn't the fastest I've ever been. 2010 was my first 100-miler. But I was, I'd had a few years to see improvement. But all I could see at that point was all the opportunities ahead of me. And so now there are different opportunities ahead of me. But I think that was just so fun to see all this excitement. Again, this adventure ahead of me. A new country, new sport, new distances. There's a lot of new stuff there. And I was getting enough experience to really enjoy them and to know that there was years of improvement ahead, not just getting faster, but being able to improve it in different ways. So but the point is, I kind of enjoyed all of it. But if I were to say one bit, it was that bit where it opened the door to everything else. That's probably the most fun.
That's cool.
Great answer.
I was also
Krissy?
debating between 2009, so same round.
Oh.
Here we are. I think you started in 2000 as well, correct? With your
2004 was
okay,
my first, or 2005 was the first race I did.
got it. Okay. Or 2006, but I was sitting there having my moment. It was a lot of what was going on in my life that influenced my running. And in 2006, I won 11 races and set 7 course records or something ridiculous.
Wow.
It was also the year I got divorced. And so there was this learning that was happening by being out there in my body so much. A lot of people would say, "Oh, what were you running from?" And I fiercely defend that I was running towards answers, and understanding this transition and step in life. The other one was 2009. And again, that was the year that I ran myself into the medical tent at Western States, and then 6 or 8 weeks later turned around and won UTMB. And the lesson learned between going for the win at Western States, I ended up second. I always discredit what that was. But the fact that I ended up in the medical tent and just not really enjoying the experience, to having a blast running in a skirt for the first time at UTMB in 2009 and pulling off the win in the way that I always had run, was a really affirming way to race. I'm so glad I didn't win Western States when I went for the win, because I reinforced the way I raced for those 9 years prior, and then on into when I haven't been racing as much anymore, but always with that love and joy for it. So yeah, for different reasons, but it was mostly for what was being learned alongside life through the running lens.
And the funny thing is, it was soon after that I met you for the first time, Krissy. You might not remember this because you wouldn't have known who I was, but it was on a group run in Bend.
Oh, I was going to say, I remember meeting you.
Okay, yeah. So it's about 2011. And I remember we're running along and someone just points out, I was like, "You know who that is?" I don't know, she seems like a good runner. It's she's just won the last 2 UTMBs. I'm like, what?
I think it was earlier than that, because I lived in Bend in 2007 and 8 and moved back to Seattle.
Oh, maybe it was before then. You definitely won UTMB because someone told me you'd won it twice.
Oh, okay.
After
maybe just right
the
after.
run. I'm like, oh, okay.
I just remember Jeff Browning telling me, who we just had on the Aging Athlete series, that episode, talking about you ran everywhere. And so it kind of feeds back into that story you told about going to the corners of the soccer. You ran all over Bend with your backpack to the coffee shop if you were working or whatever you were. The person
I just walk everywhere. If I can avoid using the
everywhere.
car. Yeah, if you don't need to use the car, walk.
Mm-hmm.
It's that mentality of, well, what would an athlete do? They'd get some exercise. They wouldn't just sit in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
As I was listening to your answers and fascinated, it made my mind wander a little bit. That I took us to a spot where we'd all lived our life on Earth, and we're someplace else, wherever you think that might be. And Scott asked the question, "What was the best part of your life? Where did you enjoy it the most?" And it probably fit that exact answer that you both gave. It's when I had enough experience behind me to see my future in front of me and to have amazement and wonder of what lies ahead. And so I think, as always, Scott, life on the trail, it translates to, our life as a whole too. It's nice that this sport is another place to see the world.
Well, I want to bring it back to the title of this episode series, The Aging Athlete. When you're in your 20s, you're all, excited about life and looking forward to it. I think if you think about your life or your running career or your athletic career as a journey, and in your early 20s, look forward to what's going to happen next. And to Krissy's point, she said so many times on these episodes of Aging Athlete is you're looking forward to let's say you're 21 and you're looking forward to what is life going to look like for me when I'm 51. How am I going to be running? Am I going to be running? Making decisions when I'm 21 so that I can enjoy being an athlete when I'm 61, 71, 81, 91, 101.
I even say this in the book about that being a key thing. I mentioned the guy from India who died recently. I think he was just over 100 and he finished a marathon. But he didn't die from old age. He got run over, I think. But he was still running races at over 100. But I remember when I first got into it, I saw these guys wearing 100 Marathon Club T-shirts doing races, and they were all gray-haired men. There's maybe a couple of women, but it's basically guys who'd done a lot of races over a lot of years. And the first time I saw them, I said, that'll never be me. And 4 years later, I joined because I'd done 100 marathons or ultras at that point. But it just, you change your perspective there. And it was so fun to be part of that. And, you can't imagine what it's going to be like in the future. But even though I didn't think I'd do 100 races like that, I did think I'd be doing it pretty much forever. Because after a year or so, I could tell that I enjoyed it. And importantly, it was just easier than a lot of other sports to fit in. So it was one that I could do forever.
When we started talking, we had the kind of the pushback about the name Aging Athlete. What if we threw in two more words, aging as an athlete? And so there's like, maybe that just shifts it just enough that it's this mentality that I want to do this for my life. So how do I go through the process as an athlete? I don't know.
Krissy, I think that's the answer. I think that's very good. We keep aging in there. That's good. We branded it with that. We don't want to abandon it. I felt I had difficulty because I'm the oldest guy on the podcast, so I was trying to get away from that term. But I think that's
crazy. I look like the oldest one on the podcast. You are the oldest one on the podcast. Thanks for reminding everyone.
Well, we would love to hear people's comments. I think maybe we should see if people have thoughts on if they've scrolled past these episodes in the Trail Runner Nation series because they're like, oh, I'm not aging. If we made that little tweak to those people that are listening, we'd love to hear what you think.
Absolutely.
Because as you said at the beginning, Krissy, when you corrected the way I was saying things initially, it's about when you're 25. How do you get the most out of it now and ongoing? And that means not burning yourself out at that point by doing too much and getting bored of it or getting injured the whole time. It's things like that. It's not just how do you avoid slowing down too much as you get old.
Ian, I while we have you, I want to say live, but it's recorded, but at least we have you in the public ear. Can we commit you to unveiling your new book on the Trail Runner Nation podcast?
Good one.
Definitely. Well, you guys have already said that you'll do the foreword, so you're going to get the first chance to read it before anyone else anyway.
Yay.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, thank you. We want to launch your publishing career here on Trail Runner Nation.
No, thank you. And it's always great to be able to have a format like this and to just have the questions back and forth. That's the whole point about it. It's different people think of different things about it. So some of the things we've talked about today, even though they make perfect sense, it's not the way I'd have said it in the first place. And like Krissy and I, we've been on multiple podcasts with a group of coaches talking. And I think that's one of the most fun things is you get the same things explained from different angles.
It's like a trail run. It's the next best thing to a conversation while running on the trail, I think.
Yeah, it harkens back to those Ultra Science podcasts. Those were so fun. Coach's Corner. I loved that.
Yeah,
I enjoyed those. Yeah.
We've got something else coming up soon, Scott, that we won't necessarily unveil now, but it's going to be good.
Little Easter.
And it's going to be a complete.
Best ever. Don is the ultimate optimist. He's going to say the best episodes of all time, 15 years or whatever. I don't even remember how long we've been doing it. The best ever.
So just subscribe now to the podcast if you're not, so you don't miss the best one ever. Krissy, you have 2 minutes left, and we value all of your time and appreciate you being here. Ian, a great, successful book coming out. I'm going to turn page by page looking for anything in there that might have been spoke about here on this podcast. I've got to think there's something you pulled out of these podcasts.
Lots of the stuff in the book is things I've written about in articles and I've discussed with you guys and others on podcasts. So that was the thing. I say the same things so many times to get certain points across. I thought I might as well put it down in a book all in one place.
Good for you. Good for you. Awesome. Well, if you're still running by the time Ian's book gets published, then you are an aging athlete. Thanks for joining us. Put on your shoes, grab a bib, get your adventure hat on, and go out and run.
Mas.